Hello, and welcome to the Dyslexic Maverick podcast. I'm your host, Nancy Disbrow. I get asked all the time, Nancy, how did you go from being a successful HR executive to creating a business focused on ADHD and dyslexic brains in the workplace? And honestly, I don't blame them for asking. So after 20 years of working my you-know-what off, I finally had my dream job. I was a vice president of HR for a great employee-owned company. Together, the CEO and I built out a dynamic executive team, led culture initiatives. I was doing all the best parts of HR and things I was actually really good at. And then one day, call it a God thing, or maybe it was burnout, but I just knew that my work there was done and life had bigger plans for me. The crazy part was I had absolutely no idea what those bigger plans were. So I'd love to take you back to how this whole crazy journey started and where my intense passion for embracing ADHD and dyslexia began. It started really when my daughter entered kindergarten, maybe even before that. Writing letters, learning how to write her name seemed to be just a larger challenge for her than other children her age. And I should mention that my husband and I both have a child from a separate previous marriage that are only 6 months apart. So while I know every child develops differently and at different times, I still had a relative baseline for how much effort she should be putting into the process, and it felt like it just didn't click for her. Now, this wasn't completely foreign to me. I struggled throughout school, and so did my father. We were raised in that try harder generation. And while looking back, I'm not sure that that was the best narrative that we could have been given. We turned out successful, and you couldn't really argue with our results. So, Generation Try Harder 3.0, here we come. Luckily, in first grade, there was a teacher that quietly pulled me aside and said, "Don't let anyone tell you that Brooke doesn't work hard. She is by far one of the hardest working children I've seen. But have you thought of getting her tested?" Now, truthfully, at this point, I was thinking, testing? Testing for what? I had no idea what I would even ask the doctor to test for. I'm so grateful for that teacher to, one, be brave enough to pull me aside and have that conversation, but also to take the time to get us headed in the right direction because she certainly knew where we should start on the testing. So, of course, we got her tested. And for the first time, it was by a dyslexia specialist. I remember sitting at our dining room table, reading the results over with the specialist, and it was like they were talking about me. Everything she described about my daughter, how she processes language and reads and writes and her spelling, I just remember looking at my husband and thinking, are they talking about Brooke or is she talking about me? I also remember being so darn excited that somebody could put my struggles into words and that I could explain how hard it was. And then, and I mean then, the guilt. The countless hours of telling her to try harder, dropping her off at school with tears in her eyes on spelling days, they all came flooding over me. She was trying hard, and my tough love wasn't helping. That was a pivotal and emotional night for me and for everyone sitting around that table. For me, it was the first day that I had hope that maybe I was as smart as other people. I knew that my daughter was smart and she just had a missing link that we were trying to figure out, but I didn't think that I was actually smart. I had joked countless times about being dyslexic when I couldn't spell something or transpose numbers, but I didn't actually think that I was dyslexic. I had grown up thinking, believing what everyone else had said to me. Things like, if you only put your energy into working hard, Nancy, you could be brilliant. Or, can you please just focus? Things like, you need to start getting serious about school. And my personal favorite, you just did this yesterday. There is no reason you can't do it again today. When people say these things, I would think to myself, if you only knew. And the ironic part is I did know that I was different. I just didn't know why or how, and no one could tell me. After this initial meeting with this dyslexia specialist, I learned so many lessons. Not only that night, but in the following weeks and months to come as I continued to research and learn more about dyslexia and ADHD. One of the very first things I learned was that putting a name to it can be so helpful. I know it can be scary to get a diagnosis, but for me, getting an actual diagnosis was so liberating. It further validated the struggles I was having and gave me a renewed energy, really to help myself. Having that vocabulary to describe how I was feeling and what was going on in my head, not to mention having science behind it, I quickly realized I wasn't quite as crazy as I felt most days. And I learned I'm a fighter. I push through hard things, just like I did when I was young and going through school, which makes me resilient and tough and a better role model for my own children. It's also allowed me to accept and acknowledge my challenges, not necessarily as weaknesses, but just simply differences in the way my brain works. It's also become very clear to me that this isn't about my work ethic or having to try harder. Deep down, I had always wondered if my 150% was really good enough. Now I know that my 150% is truly 150% and I am good enough. Being able to say I'm dyslexic and I have ADHD was a true turning point for me, not only in my career, but in how I talk to myself and how I advocate for the things I need in business to make me successful. I also realize that I'm not alone. Actually, I'm in really, really good company. So, the other cool part about having a name for what you're going through is that you can find others who are going through similar situations. Now, I could research and learn more about different brains that work like mine. I could also find social media influencers and other people on YouTube and Google that could really bring my struggles to life. It was so great to find so many people sharing their struggles and challenges in funny and dynamic ways and to realize that I am not alone in this process. I was so surprised to learn that it's estimated that 20% of the population is dyslexic. That's over 40 million people in the United States. Yet only 2 million people have an actual diagnosis. By sheer statistics, I believe I wasn't the only one struggling in that elementary school class all those years. There were probably 3 to 4 other children that were in the same class thinking, why is this so hard for me? I also learned that 50% of self made millionaires are dyslexic and that over 25% of CEOs have ADHD. And that was a true mental shift for me. The leaders that I was sitting at the table with also may have had uniquely wired brains. Learning that 3 out of the 5 original sharks on the TV show Shark Tank were dyslexic was super exciting because I've always loved business and I could relate to how their brains loved business as well. And understanding that I'm among a great group of brilliant people like Richard Branson and Steven Spielberg and Jeff Bezos, that was really exciting. Not just for me, but for my daughter too, to understand that her brain was wired in this beautiful and unique way. But even with all those big names that I found throughout my research, all I really had to do was look at my own family tree to see that my father also has a very uniquely wired brain that has made him very successful in business as well. He had successful businesses, he has patents on welding machines, and was never formally taught to weld. It's simply remarkable how much he's accomplished. Yet he also struggled in school and shares many of the same challenges that my daughter and I face. Where I once felt like I was on an island all by myself, scared that somebody would find out my flaws. And let me tell you, that was truly exhausting, double and triple checking my work all the time. I learned that my secret sauce as a leader was also tied to my ADHD and dyslexic brain. My differently wired brain was quite literally responsible for the success that I had had in my career in HR and just in business in general. I will say it doesn't necessarily feel like a superpower for me, more like I'm just looking at the world through a different set of glasses than everyone else around me. One example I love to give when I'm speaking to large groups of people is the time that I was asked to run an accounting department for a transportation company I was working for. By all accounts, this was a terrible idea, especially considering that I'm even worse with transposing numbers than I am with spelling. And let me tell you, I'm a terrible speller, especially because I was leading a sales team and we were doing really well and I was loving my job. Anyways, the CEO of that transportation company saw something in me that I had not yet figured out in myself. What he saw was that I was talented in seeing the big picture and the strategic vision, and that I could lead teams and put teams together. And most importantly, sell this vision to a team that was struggling just to keep the wheels on day to day. I had no idea I had those skills. Sure, I knew I was somewhat of a natural leader from Air Force ROTC, but a strategic vision? I had no idea. I also had no idea that not everyone could see a situation as a big picture and all at once. I call it my helicopter view now, but at the time, I had no idea that other people didn't see it like I do. I would look around the leadership table and think, why are you guys not seeing what I'm seeing? And am I looking at it wrong or did I miss something? Finally, I would get up the courage to offer a suggestion, and they would all praise me and say, my gosh, Nancy, how did it take you this long were you holding back your idea? And truly, it was just a lack of confidence, and I thought that it was in front of everyone. For my brain, it was crystal clear how random things are connected and can work together and see the big picture, which is also a very dyslexic trait that I've learned to capitalize on. One more thing. Since I've made a career out of sharing my story and helping others embrace their ADHD and dyslexia and all of their uniqueness in their brains, I will tell you that my story is very similar to a lot of people's. If you were never diagnosed or diagnosed late in life, or maybe you're one of those people that learned about your unique brain through one of your children's diagnoses, I want you to know that you are among the majority. We are all here figuring this out together. My hope is that this podcast will be a resource for you, a resource that I wish I would have had 10 years ago. As a mom searching to find answers, but also as a business leader who is in a leadership position to help, if I only would have known how to help those neurodivergent brains within the organizations I served. So tune in every Tuesday as I release a new episode with other experts in the field of neurodiversity. Some will be specialized in ADHD and dyslexia. Others will be specialized in the career side of neurodiversity. And some may be more focused on parents and that spouse relationship as well. I want to bring you all kinds of perspectives so we can continue to learn, love, and understand ourselves a little bit more each day. So be sure to hit that plus sign and that follow button on your podcast app to subscribe to the show and ensure you won't miss a single episode. But for today, just remember, you are not alone in this journey. You are right where you are supposed to be, and I'm right here with you. Until next time, friends, embrace those unique brains. Thanks for listening. If you like this episode, I would love it if you would consider subscribing. It is literally the best way you can support our work here. And if you're feeling extra generous, take a screenshot and tag us on social with one of your takeaways from the episode. Until next time, friends, embrace that unique brain you've been given.